Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome. This is the local project delivery and funding workshop. My name is Ryan Gordon. I work for the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission in the Transportation Program Development Group. Today, I will be one of your presenters today. The other one will be Dawn Schilling from McCormick Taylor. And I'll just give you a brief intro here to Dawn. Dawn is a licensed professional engineer in Pennsylvania and is certified by the American Institute of Certified Planners. She currently works for McCormick Taylor as a senior project manager out of the firm's Pittsburgh office. She teaches the National Highway Institute's NEPA courses and has helped develop and instruct the course on PennDOT's Publication 740, the Local Project Delivery Manual. So between me and Dawn, we'll be presenting the material today. This workshop is geared towards local municipalities and consultants that work with those local sponsors and local municipalities. The goal of the workshop today is to provide information about sources of funding for local transportation projects and some keys to successful local project delivery. Before we really get rolling, I wanted to just do a couple of virtual meeting housekeeping items. Right now, everyone is muted. If you could keep your cameras off, that'll help with our ability to do the webinar. We'll get to questions, and questions can be entered in the chat box, and we will follow up with answering those questions in the amount of time that we can at the end of the presentation. So all of the questions that we get here, we will answer in a Q&A document that we will make available on our website, on SPC's website, following the meeting. So if you don't get an answer to your question on today's webinar, we'll either get back to you on it, or you can look and see what our answer is on that Q&A document that we will post. I will also be posting the PowerPoint presentation and a recording of this webinar for use in the future, and for folks that couldn't, make it at today's date and time. So, next slide. Thank you. So, what are we going to cover here in the next hour and a half or so between me and Dawn? Well, first, I'm going to provide some background on what SPC is and what we do. And I'll be focusing mostly on our transportation planning activities. Then I'll focus on two of our SPC programs that utilize our federal TIP funds that are either open or about to open for applications. I'll be providing details on project eligibility, application procedures, and our selection processes, as well as a few examples of projects we've funded with this type of funding. Then I'll turn it over to Dawn. She will review some other sources of funds for local projects from other agencies, such as PennDOT, DCED, DCNR, and a few other sources. So we'll provide you, a good spectrum of other possible funding sources. And then the last third or so of this webinar, Dawn is going to provide us an overview of the steps involved in locally administering a transportation project, particularly with regards to the federal funding through the SPC programs that I'm going to review. And then, like I said, at the end, we'll address comments and make those answers available, like I said, on our website. So next slide, please.
Not sure what happened, Ryan. It stopped advancing. So
okay.
Let me see if I can get this to fix. There we go. Sorry about that.
Okay. So what is SPC? We're the region's metropolitan planning organization and local development district. So we're very focused on two things: transportation and economic development, and the programs related to those, specifically, the federal funds that come through to us. We're comprised of county commissioners, county commissioner appointees, PennDOT officials, transit authority officials, and local, state, and federal agencies. We comprise the 10 counties of Pittsburgh, Allegheny County, and the surrounding 9 counties. And really, we serve as a forum for identifying needs, proposing solutions, and determining where and how federal transportation dollars are spent within the planning area. And this is done through the completion of studies, analysis, additional planning activities that are all done to facilitate this collaborative decision making. So really, MPOs function as the forum for cooperative transportation decision making in the metropolitan region. Next slide, please. So what do we do? The role that SPC has is that we are a regional center for collaboration and cooperation on transportation planning issues. We are the regional data center providing a wide range of data, such as census data, economic data, employment data, transportation, such as traffic data. We have a huge inventory of GIS data and much more. We provide also technical assistance to our member counties and via them to municipalities on subjects such as project funding, project development and delivery, fulfilling data requests, mapping, and municipal training through our assistance with the LTAP program. We offer funding through a variety of different ways, but today I'm going to be talking about 2 of our discretionary programs that provide funding for transportation projects. We also conduct a variety of other planning studies and analysis that provide input into the planning process, and we maintain what's called a regional travel demand model. And lastly, we offer assistance on the economic development side in the form of loans and procurement assistance for small businesses. And we also run a number of economic development programs that we coordinate. Next slide, please. So, like I said, the MPOs are a forum for the cooperative transportation decision making for the metropolitan area. And transportation planning has a lot of different entities and a lot of stakeholders. Here are just a few of, could you go back slightly? Yeah. These are just a few of the entities in which SPC works. We work with them in development of our transportation plans and programs, and there are many different elements to that. And here are just a snapshot of a few, but it ranges from the public all the way up to our federal highway and federal transit agencies. Next slide, please. So as a result of that collaboration process, one of the main things that we produce is the region's TIP, or Transportation Improvement Program. The TIP identifies the region's highest priority transportation projects and develops multi-year program of implementation, and it coordinates the funding over a course of 4 years. Now, we redo the TIP every 2 years. It's a major undertaking and involves cooperation with our PennDOT districts and other local, state, and federal officials. Also involves a lot of public involvement as well. So for local entities that are tuned in, what is important for you? It's important to monitor your upcoming projects that are in your municipalities that may be on our TIP, for opportunities for collaboration with the project sponsor, either the county or PennDOT. It's important to discuss the goals of your community with SPC's planners and your county planning office and PennDOT. And it's also important to provide information regarding local priorities and transportation needs. And the last thing you want to do is just kind of build that relationship with your PennDOT district folks and your county planners and the SPC staff. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned a few slides back, SPC runs 2 funding programs that are currently accepting applications. And those programs are the SPC Regional Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program, or the TA program, you'll hear me call it. Also, we have the SPC's Congestion Management and Air Quality Program, or CMAQ, as you'll hear me say. So I'm just going to start out with the TA program. This program was introduced probably 10 or 12 years back under our Federal Transportation Act called MAP 21. It merged several previously standalone programs, such as the Transportation Enhancements Program, the Safe Routes to School Program, the Scenic Byways Program, and the Recreational Trails Program. When MAP 21 came out, everything got merged together and just called Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program. The FAST Act, which is the Transportation Act we're currently under, reauthorized this money. So we're continuing to operate these programs under the name of Transportation Alternatives. So this program is a reimbursement program, which means we don't just forward you money for projects in advance. This is tightly controlled, and you're being reimbursed for approved project expenditures. There's a match. Like a lot of federal programs, this involves a match. In the case of the TA program, you're only allowed to use this TA funding for construction only. Therefore, all the activities that lead up to the pre-construction phases that lead up to construction are going to serve as your local match. How much TA funding do we have to work with? Not a ton. We have 1.8 million per year, and that's for region-wide for all 10 counties. So it's very competitive, and we try to select our projects every 2 years. That depends on how our program's being delivered and what kind of capacity we have to take on new projects. Just wanted to point you out to the chat box where Lily's posted the link to our website where we have all of our TA guidance. There's much more detail about all the TA aspects in this guidance. So you're going to want to get on our website and download that. There are certain eligible applicants for the TA program, and those are first and foremost local government. So municipalities, cities, boroughs, those are eligible applicants, along with regional transportation authorities, which we have a few of, transit agencies, or school districts, or natural resource agencies. Now, we have that all detailed in the guidance, but those are the main groups that are eligible to receive TA funds. Now, if you're have an interest in a project, but you're not one of those eligible applicants, then you're going to have to work with either your local government or your county to convince them to sponsor a project. So next slide, please. So what are the eligible uses for TA funds? Again, full list is detailed in the guidance document, but just a couple of the biggies are bicycle and pedestrian facilities. That's what we really in our region try to use these funds for. I think almost all the projects we've done would fit into this category of either bicycle or pedestrian facilities. There's a few other things that are eligible. These are a little bit more rare, but we have funded some of these in the past. We've funded mostly, like I said, pedestrian and bike facilities. including different trail segments throughout the region. We've funded a bunch of small trail segments that fit into the larger regional trail network. We funded a lot of small pedestrian facilities, particularly things that connect to schools or connect to transit facilities. So we're really trying to be strategic with where we do our pedestrian facility projects. So those, like I said, there's much more detail in our guidance that you'll want to look at. Next slide, please. So this is just one example of a TA project that was recently completed. We've got projects throughout the region. This one happened to be in the city of Pittsburgh with the Urban Redevelopment Authority. And this was just a project that received both TA funds from our regional pot and from PennDOT TA funds as well. It was a project that improved pedestrian connections in the Homewood area near the busway, the East Busway stop and the Faison Elementary School. So like I said, we try to be strategic in getting a lot of bang for our buck here when we are looking at these pedestrian facilities. You know, helping kids get safely to school, helping pedestrians safely get across some locations is really the main thing we're trying to do there. We funded a number of other trail segment or a number of other pedestrian facilities like this. Next slide, please. So like I said, there's two kind of streams to this TA funding. They're distinct and separate. One is run by us, SPC, and it's called the Regional TA Program. Our TA program is open right now through October 15th. And like I said, all the information that you'll need is on our website, on that guidance. You'll be able to download our pre-application and our application right from that website. There's also a PennDOT process that selects TA projects as well. That also closes on October 15th. It's a totally separate process for applications. We put the link up there. We also have the link on our TA page. So I really encourage you to check that out for more information on just how the PennDOT side of the TA program operates. Next slide, please. So the review and selection process. Here's how we kind of do this within SPC. We have a process whereby we evaluate all of our candidate projects, and we use our Transportation Technical Committee as the selection committee. They will be making the TA selections in around December. SPC staff, we go through these applications and score them technically. We look at them for eligibility, we look at them for deliverability, and we look at them for ancillary factors on just how good of a project they are. And then we will provide those as information to our selection committee, and we will finalize the scoring in November. And we will actually release what our recommended TA projects are in December. So that gives you an idea of the timeline. So switching gears here, that's everything about our region's TA program. Now I'm going to shift gears slightly to the other program I want to talk about, which is the Congestion Management and Air Quality, or CMAQ program. This program also uses federal funds. It comes to us as part of our tip distribution, and it's for transportation projects and programs that will contribute to attainment or maintenance of the National Ambient Air Quality Standards for ozone, carbon monoxide, and particulate matter. So basically what that means is you're going to have to demonstrate that your project can achieve reductions in those pollutants. And we have a very technical process for identifying those projects and identifying what the benefits of those projects are, particularly with those natural ambient air quality standards in mind. This program has a little bit more money. It has approximately $18 million per year, and projects are also selected competitively through a process I'll describe here in a slide or two. It's also a reimbursement program similar to the TA program. You're being reimbursed for eligible projects and the phases of those eligible projects. The match on this is 20%. So any sponsor of a CMAQ project will have to match at a 20%. The other thing we try to mention here is they must be consistent with our long-range plan, and they must be used in air quality, non-attainment, or air quality maintenance areas. I will show maps of those here in a slide or two. Nonprofit organizations are not direct recipients of these funds, but may partner with other eligible entities. So what are the eligible applicants for CMAQ? That would be any qualified government entity. That includes local governments, transit agencies, port authorities, state agencies such as PennDOT. They're all our typical sponsors of CMAQ funding. And like I said, if you're not one of those entities I just mentioned, you're going to have to partner with an agency that is eligible to be a CMAQ sponsor of a project. There must be a formal agreement in place between any partnering that goes on in order to receive those funds. So next slide, please. So what are some of the eligible uses of CMAQ funds? Again, you're going to want to check our CMAQ website and our CMAQ guidance for details on these. Our CMAQ guidance will be released on Monday, and I'll get to that in the next slide. But here I just wanted to mention what are the eligible uses or eligible project of CMAQ. And this is an abbreviated list, but basically anything for public transportation, anything on traffic flow that would be targeted towards like HOV lanes or reduction in single occupancy vehicles. We've done a lot of work on HOV lanes or in improving traffic flow, so you're not having just vehicles sitting in congestion. Non-recreational bike and pedestrian facilities. We haven't funded a ton of this. We have funded, for example, the bike share program in the city of Pittsburgh. We've also funded like the bike racks that went on the buses, things like that. Ride sharing or TDM, transportation demand management projects are eligible. Also alternative fuels, some alternative fuels projects that we're going to have to get eligibility on those, but some of them are eligible. And then traffic signal upgrades and monitorization, which we call adaptive signals. We've done a lot of projects on those in the past. And intermodal connections. So what are things that are not eligible? So any project that's like a capacity adding where we're like adding lanes or adding new roadway, those are not eligible. Just run-of-the-mill maintenance is not eligible. If you have, a parking ride and you want to like repave it, that's not eligible. And also planning studies. Anything that's like a planning study is not eligible. We're trying to focus this money on delivering construction projects. Okay, next slide. Okay. So the application period, like I said, is going to start Monday. We will be putting all of the resources that you need on our website, including our guidance document and all of our application materials. These will be on our website on Monday. For those of you that are receiving our technical committee information will include you on an email blast on Monday morning. So look to our website, and we'll have all that information available at that time. It will be open for approximately a month. The deadline's going to be September 24th for all of the application materials to be submitted. Next slide, please. These are the areas that qualify as the 8-hour ozone areas. The only one that's not eligible for CMAQ funds would be Lawrence here on this one. Next slide, please. And then this is a map showing the air quality designations for the other air quality measures of PM 2.5. Like I said, there's a lot to get into there, but that's all detailed in the guidance. So before you start thinking about CMAQ, you need to be thinking about, am I in one of these areas, and is my project going to help with that particular pollutant? Next slide, please. So SPC, we have an evaluation committee that looks over all of our technical scoring and all of our ancillary scoring. It's called the CMAQ Evaluation Committee. It's made up of members of our technical committee, and also includes some other members from like the Allegheny Health Department and a couple other stakeholder groups. So it's very diverse, very balanced representation throughout our different committees. And like I said, it does include also DEP and Allegheny County and some of the health related agencies that deal with air pollution. So the CEC looks at all of our scoring that we do. We rate these also on deliverability. We rate them on technical analysis, like how well they do at targeting the pollutants. And we also have some ancillary factors about how well does the project fit in with what we're trying to do with our long-range plan, policies, and strategies. So when all that's done, our evaluation committee reviews that and makes recommendations. Similar to the TA program, we're expecting to have this done by December for the projects that we will put on the 2023 tip, which would start in October 2023. That's 2022. Next slide, please. So what are some examples of CMAQ projects? This was one that we recently did that was partially funded with CMAQ. It includes a lot of signal upgrades, and these signal upgrades were coordinated, which is a requirement because we're only going to see air quality benefit if we're reducing the queuing that's happening at these signals. So that was the real aspect of it that made it a CMAQ project. However, as you can see from the description, it had a lot of other elements too, which when you have that kind of thing, it helps with your kind of your other ancillary scoring. So this one, you know, had upgrades for pavement markings and signage. It upgraded the ADA ramps and some of the sidewalks. It removed some of the concrete impediments, and it really did reduce conflicts for pedestrians through this Allegheny Circle area. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to put a slide in here on a couple of other projects we've done with CMAQ, just to give you an idea of what kind of things we've done and what kind of things have been successful. We've funded transit bus replacements through both Port Authority and other operators. Our regional signal program we funded through CMAQ, which provides technical assistance to signal upgrades and signal coordination. Freeway service patrols, so those tow trucks that are sitting on side of the parkway or Route 28, for incident management. We've funded those with CMAQ. The Port of Pittsburgh has done numerous marine diesel retrofits, which is they're taking engines from their tugboats and converting them from dirty diesel to some cleaner options. And Pittsburgh's bike share program, the initial kickoff and startup of that was funded through CMAQ. So that just gives you an example. There's a couple more on there, but just gives you an example of some of the projects we've done with CMAQ funds. I did think of something I did want to mention back on the TA program before I turn it over to Dawn. I wanted to make the point that we do have a pre-application on the TA program, and we have extended the deadline to submit a pre-application to SPC for a potential TA application. We've extended that to September 8th. So around about 3 weeks from now, we'll be looking at everything we've gotten in on the pre-application. So you're going to want to make sure you get that pre-application into us. That just gives us a heads up, and we can like do a quick look at eligibility and some other things to just kind of help you if you needed it. So just wanted to mention that on the TA program. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Dawn. This really concludes the portion of the program that focused in on SPC's funding and then the two programs we have open. Dawn's going to give us an overview of a few other funding programs that are out there, and we do produce a funding guidance that includes many of the things that Dawn is going to go over. We do include a funding guidance on our website for these types of programs. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to Dawn so she can give you a taste of some of the other funding that's out here. And she'll finish up with an overview of the project delivery process. So hopefully I didn't take too much time there, Dawn. Didn't pinch you too bad there, but I mean, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. I'm actually going to go through some of these pretty quickly. As Ryan mentioned, SPC does have a handout that you can look at to get more information. And a lot of these change fairly frequently in terms of types of projects, types of applicants that are eligible. And so I'm going to go over it quickly, but if you do see something you're interested in, I would recommend going to the particular agency's website, whether that be DCED, DCNR, or PennDOT, to look up their requirements to make sure you're working with the latest guidance for any of these particular funding programs. The first one we're going to talk about is PennDOT's Multimodal Transportation Fund, not to be confused with DCED's Multimodal Transportation Fund. Both agencies have these types of funds that are used for grants for similar types of projects, but they are different funds. They're administered by two different agencies. They can be combined on projects, and pretty much any of these funding sources that Ryan has talked about, or any of the ones I'm going to talk about, they are able to be combined when you're working on a project. But the big thing you have to really understand is what the requirements are for each of the grant programs, because you have to be sure that you are meeting the requirements for that specific program in order to be eligible for the funding. And if you don't meet the requirements, or you skip a step somewhere, you can risk losing your money. The PennDOT Multimodal Fund, again, like Ryan mentioned, is a reimbursement program. You are reimbursed for expenses that you've already expended. So it's based on invoices to PennDOT. It does have a match. You cannot use any money that you get through another state or federal grant as part of the match. You can combine them, but you can't use that as part of the match. So the match has to come from the local sponsor. There is $77 million available for this. It's a statewide program, and there are limits on the size of funds that can be obtained through this grant program. It's between $100,000 and $3 million is the maximum amount of grant that you will get out of this fund. And it can be used for When we say multimodal, we mean projects that look at all of the different or several different modes of transportation. So vehicular, pedestrian, bicycles, transit, railroad. So there's a lot of different types of projects that can be completed with a multimodal transportation fund, but they must have a component where they are focusing on different modes of transportation, preferably trying to link different modes or improve connections between different modes. You can do streetscapes, sidewalks, lighting. Um, there have been different types of railroad projects done. Transit-oriented development are done with these types of PennDOT multimodal funds. This railroad project is with CSX as an example of one project that was done with PennDOT Multimodal. This is in McKees Rocks and Stowe Township, and the purpose of this was to facilitate freight movement through this area, both rail and truck. So that's the multimodal, looking at both vehicular and railroad freight movement. There is going to be a new link to this area. There's improvements to the intersection occurring with this project. And again, the whole purpose is to better facilitate that connection between truck traffic and the railroad terminal in this area to improve the connection between those two modes of transportation. Now, DCED's Multimodal Transportation Fund is also reimbursement, but it's not quite the same as PennDOT. They release a set amount or set percentage of funds every 30 days to successful applicants for this fund. Again, is a 30% match required for this fund. Opens typically during the summer. And the eligible agencies are local governments, councils of government, business and economic development organizations, transit organizations, port authority, and again, same types of project limits, 100,000 to 3 million for these DCED multimodal grants. Very similar types of projects can be completed with these multimodal grants as completed with PennDOT. But again, as I mentioned, just make sure if you are getting one of these types of grants from either PennDOT or DCED that you understand the requirements, because DCED's requirements are slightly different than PennDOT's in terms of project reporting and clearances and the types of information you have to provide back to the funding agency in order to make you eligible for these grants. This is another DCED program under Act 13, and there are actually several funding programs under Act 13. We're not going to cover them all. The Greenway Trails and Recreation Program is one of them. Just to briefly mention, there's also sewage facilities planning grants available under Act 13, watershed monitoring and restoration, flood mitigation. There are grants related to oil and gas well plugging, and there's also grants related to acid mine drainage abatement and treatment available under Act 13. But the one we're going to talk about is the Greenways Trails and Recreation Program. Again, a reimbursement program with funds released every 30 days. A certain percentage of the funds are released every 30 days. There is 15% match, again, required on this one. And this is one that's usually open in the winter and went from winter to spring of each year. And it has a limit of $250,000. So anything smaller than $250,000 would be eligible, but anything larger could not be eligible under this program. And this might be a case where if you have a project that's larger than that, you could fund a piece of it with this and then a piece of it with something else. The types of uses are, of course, recreational, greenways, trails, river conservation. And this grant program is one of the few that can be used for planning. Many of the fund programs, in fact, I think all of them we've talked about previously, cannot be used for planning. As Ryan mentioned, the TA program, both PennDOT and SPC, the TA money can only be used for construction. The upfront cost or the responsibility of the sponsor. So that's a construction only. The multimodal programs must lead to construction of a project. So this DCED Greenways and Trails program is the only one we've talked about so far that can be used for studies or planning work related to a project. There's a few more we'll talk about in a little bit, but I did want to point that out. This is an example of a project that used both TA funding from SPC and PennDOT and used multimodal, greenways, trails, and other funding sources for this project. And as I mentioned, because you combine those different sources in a project like this, you just need to make sure that you're meeting the requirements of all of the different agencies and all of the different funding programs that are available. And this project is one of the components within the Three Rivers Heritage Trail along the Allegheny River. It's part of a proposed trail that will go from Erie to Pittsburgh and Harrisburg to Pittsburgh along the Mainline Canal Greenway. So it's part of a much larger trail project. This one is being constructed or was constructed on the site of a former brownfield in Etna. Just upstream from Sharpsburg Borough, if you're familiar with that area. There's an overlook of the river. There were access ramps included in order to bring access down into the riverfront area. Off-road, bike trails, pedestrian trails, all of that were included in this project. So DCNR C2P2 or Community Recreation and Conservation Program. This is another one that can be used for planning. It can also be used for acquiring land for projects. Again, that's a little bit different than a lot of the other grants. A lot of the other grants, you cannot use them to purchase your land or to plan for the development. But this one is awarded to municipalities and nonprofit organizations for recreation, park, and conservation projects. Does have a 50% match, and it opens typically the same as some of the other ones in the winter to spring timeframe. This Newcastle Regional Riverwalk project is one that has, again, a mix of TA and C2P2 money. This project is actually, we're hoping it should be going to construction advertisement today. So it's just getting started. If it's not today, it will be within the next couple of days that this project gets out for contractors' bids. But it's a project that's going to replace some deteriorated pedestrian infrastructure and create some new bicycle connections that will have better access to some of the tourism and economic development areas within the Newcastle area. So these next couple of grant programs I'm going to talk about are for traffic signals only. The first one, the Green Light Go program, is a PennDOT program. Again, reimbursement has a 20% match. There's usually around $40 million available statewide in this program. Green Light Go right now, I believe, is suspended. I don't know when it might be reopened, but as of right now, this program is not available, but we wanted to include it just so you were aware it was a program that was available, and we're thinking it is going to become available again. But just keep in mind, this program or this funding source is only for improvements to existing signals on state and local highways. So as such, it's only can only be obtained by municipalities, counties, and other planning organizations that have ownership in state and local highway signals. And these are some of the uses, again, all related to signals, upgrading your signals, better connection of signals, removing signals if there are signals that are not needed. This one can be used to study corridors in regards to their signals and whether or not signals are still warranted and whether or not they can be removed. So it can be used for studies, but again, only studies related to traffic signals. The Automated Red Light Enforcement Program, or ARLE program, is another reimbursement program through PennDOT. There is no match required. However, cost sharing is encouraged with this program because there's not a lot of funding available. The funding available for this program varies each year because it depends on how much money was collected through automated red light enforcement. Typically around 3 to 8.8 million available each year. And again, this source of funding can only be used on signal projects. Again, upgrades can also, like Green Light Go, be used for study and removal of unwarranted signals. ARLI can also be used, a little different than Green Light Go, if you have a signalized intersection that has drainage issues, signing issues, has some concerns with turning lanes. You can use ARLI money to help you make drainage improvements, help improve signing, help restripe the intersection, or construct turning lanes at your signalized intersections with ARLI funds. These next few sources are some different programs that are also available primarily through either PennDOT or some of the local county programs. The first one, the funding for off-system bridges. This is a TIP funded source, so it needs to be for projects that are on the Transportation Improvement Program. So municipalities are eligible for these funds for local bridges. The bridges have to be 20 feet in length. They must be in poor condition, and poor condition is the old substandard, if you're familiar with the old terminology. But these are poor condition bridges, must be consistent with the long range plan, meaning they must be bridges that were identified on the regional long range plan as in need of improvement, and they must be projects that are on the TIP. Again, this is a program that is for reimbursement of expended funds, and it requires a 20% match. So this next source of fund, or the next few we're going to talk about, the Pennsylvania Infrastructure Bank is actually a loan program. It's a low interest program through the state. The current interest rate is 1.625. And you can get loans for pretty much any phase of projects from the Pennsylvania Infrastructure Bank. So design, right of way, so acquiring land, maintenance of a wide variety of different types of transportation infrastructure can be funded through the Infrastructure Bank. Some of the counties also have specific programs for their municipalities. For instance, Allegheny County has 3 different programs. One's the Active Allegheny Grant Program. It's a program that supports planning and design of bicycle improvements. There's also some funding sources related to gaming. The Gaming and Economic Development Tourism Fund awards up to $500,000 for planning, engineering, and construction of infrastructure improvements. And there could be other funding sources available in your county. You can contact SPC to see if they know about any other county programs that might be available, or you can contact your county planners to see what sources they might be aware of. And as I mentioned, there are only a few sources of funds for planning of projects or for planning studies. The DCED C2P2, DCED, the Greenways Trail and Recreation Program, and then the PA Department of Health also has a program called PA WalkWorks. All 4 of these sources are available for planning money. So if you're looking to do a study, feasibility study, whatever it may be, you can get funding for those types of projects or studies through these sources. Now, this next section, as Ryan mentioned, most of what this next section covers is related to SPC and PennDOT projects that are funded through the TIP. And a lot of this information comes from Pub 740, which is PennDOT's publication on delivery of local projects. So a lot of this will not specifically apply to DCED, DCNR, those types of funding sources. You need to make sure you understand what their requirements are. But anytime you're looking to get a project funded through SPC and PennDOT, you need to consider the comprehensive plans and other transportation plans in the area, like the active transportation plans, and then also the long range transportation plan, because projects that are funded by PennDOT and SPC need to either come from one of these plans, specifically the long range plan, or must be consistent with these plans in order to be funded. And so what's the first thing you need to do when you have a project you want to get funded through one of these sources? One of the most important things, especially for a PennDOT and SPC project that is using federal money, is that you need to have a strong purpose and need statement. So just a little bit about what the purpose and the need statements are. The purpose is a broad statement that talks about what your project is trying to achieve. So what is the purpose, the reason for this project? What are you trying to accomplish by proposing this project? Needs are very specific transportation problems that can be addressed or are going to be addressed by the project. They must be tangible, meaning they must be able to be measured. They must be fact-based, so you must have facts of some type to support your needs statement. And they must be focused on transportation problems. They should not be solutions. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, because the need statements are one of the most important part of these projects, of any PennDOT or federally funded project. And it's a weak need statement is a lot of the reason why projects flounder. This slide just shows some of the typical categories of needs. You can have congestion problems or capacity problems on a highway or a facility, or even sidewalks that lead to a need statement. You can have deficiencies or structural conditions that lead to a need to improve whatever the structure or the facility may be. There can be missing links within the system, and that can be a link within a trail, within a sidewalk, or it can be a link between modes. Like we mentioned the CSX project a little bit earlier, that was kind of a missing link between the truck and rail connections that project is helping establish. There can be economic development needs. I will tell you that economic development needs are very highly scrutinized by the Federal Highway Administration, and it can be difficult to prove an economic development need on for a project without some other type of need also supporting the project. And I would say if you have an economic development need, you probably also have a system linkage need somewhere. And so you probably want to focus on the system linkage need and where that missing connection is, as opposed to focus on economic development. And there can also be needs related to legislative intent, where a project is written into legislation, and that's where the need comes from. Just a couple of quick examples of needs. The original need for this example says, the existing bridge needs replaced. The original bridge the bridge needs replaced is not really a need statement. That's a solution, because you're jumping to the fact that the bridge needs replaced. Bridges don't always need replaced, and this is especially critical when you have a historic bridge. We should not be jumping to the conclusion that a historic bridge must be replaced at the very beginning of a project. Typically, the need is more related to what is in the improved column here, that the bridge is in poor condition, weight restricted, there's a 10-mile detour for buses and emergency service providers because they can't use the bridge. And so that's the reason why something needs done with the bridge. When you have a historic bridge, the Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission is going to require that you evaluate whether or not the bridge can be rehabilitated to meet your needs. So you cannot just automatically jump to a replacement. And there also needs to be some evaluation as to whether or not the bridge could just be removed. If there isn't a strong need for access, for emergency service provider access, there could be an argument that one of the solutions is to remove the bridge. So you just need to be careful that your need statement is not pointing to a solution before you've actually established what the problems are that are causing you to bring the project up in the first place. This is another example of a need that maybe wasn't written so well at first. The trails along the river need to be connected. That may be true, may not be true, but just stating that without some type of proof, without some type of evidence about why they need to be connected is probably not going to be a strong enough need to get your project funded or to help your project through the process. An improved need in this case is more specific about where the trails are located and why there is a missing connection, whether that be, that there's a bridge that is missing and there's no way to get from the north side of the river to the south side of the river on this trail, or that there's just a piece of the trail that's missing and there's no way to walk from wherever the trail ends now to the other end of the trail. So you just want to make sure that your needs are evidence-based and are talking about transportation problems and not solutions. Oops, sorry about that. So there is a handout that is available. I think we're going to be putting a link to the handout in the chat box, but it's also available on the SPC website that Ryan talked about. And what it provides is a list of contacts for your local PennDOT districts, for SPC, and for your county, where you can talk to the folks at those agencies about your proposed project, talk a little bit about what you're thinking your needs are, and they can help you better define your project and help you better understand what types of funding might be available for the project you're proposing. Another source for information is PennDOT's Local Project Delivery Manual. That is PennDOT Publication 740. There's a link to the manual on this slide, but you can also, if you Google PennDOT Publication 740, you will come up with the publication. PennDOT also has a local project delivery website where they have additional information on local projects, on what the requirements are to have a local project funded through PennDOT and the Federal Highway Administration. There's also a series of, I think there's 6 or 7 short videos. I think each video is about 5 to no more than 10 minutes long that cover each of the chapters in Pub 740. So there's a video on right-of-way clearance. There's a video on administration of local projects, and you can view those videos at your leisure. And again, like I said, they're pretty brief and they give you more in-depth information on the requirements for these local projects. And I also want to mention in September, the class may be full, but September 14th and 15th, 2 morning sessions, 9 a.m. to noon each day. I will be teaching a class for PennDOT on Publication 740. I think some of you may be in it. Those of you who are not in the class, you can check to see if it's available through the PennDOT training calendar. Again, just Google PennDOT training calendar and then look for Publication 740 or local project delivery training. If the class is full, it should be offered again in the spring. Typically, it's offered once every spring in April or May, and then again in the fall in September or October of each year. Another source of information is Federal Highway site. FHWA Federal Aid Assistance site has an online library of documents and videos that are specifically designed for local sponsors looking to complete a project with federal money. It has a lot of information on it to help you better understand the federal requirements related to these types of projects and these types of funding sources. PennDOT Connects, just going to mention this briefly. This is something that for any project funded with federal dollars through PennDOT or SPC, the project must go through the PennDOT Connects process. PennDOT Connects is an early collaboration process with all the local sponsors, the municipalities, the counties, local transit agencies, where everyone comes together with PennDOT and SPC to talk about projects and make sure we understand the full range of issues that could be occurring in the area. This gives us an opportunity to potentially adjust scopes of work if there are additional needs that we're not aware of, if funding is available. If funding is not available because we are working with a limited funding source, then at least it helps us to identify early what additional issues may be out there so that we can start looking for ways to address those issues as we move forward, even if it's not able to be added to a particular project that we're addressing. But PennDOT has a PennDOT Connects page where you can go for more information on this process as well. And any project that is funded through the TIP will have to go through the PennDOT Connects process and has to have a PennDOT Connects form completed for that project. And again, you can find more information on that on PennDOT's PennDOT Connects page. Project administration for local projects, that's related to the scope, estimate, and schedule. In addition to the needs, making sure that you have a well-defined scope of work, a planning level cost estimate that is sufficient for that scope, and that you understand the schedule that is required to complete a project with state and federal money is very important. Every project is unique, and there are some factors that can substantially affect the schedule and the amount of design and coordination that is needed on a project. So for those projects, for instance, where you're getting TA funds for construction of a project, it's important that if you are the local sponsor, you understand the intricacies of what is going to be required to design that project, because you're going to be responsible for paying for that part of the design. And some of these projects can be quite time intensive and labor intensive to get designed. And just a few things that affect the scope and the schedule and the cost for a project is any state or federally funded project has to utilize state and federal wage rates during construction, which can increase cost. Construction must utilize and be consistent with PennDOT approved materials and methods, which again can add cost to a project. And anytime you have a project that requires right-of-way, you have to follow the federal process for right-of-way acquisition, or you can lose your funding, and that is a timely process to get through that. So it's just very important that you make sure you understand what is required to get these projects built through the local process. This is a spreadsheet or a timeline that gives you some general ideas of what would be needed to build these and design these projects. This is kind of a best case scenario. Projects that require right-of-way, projects that have a lot of utility relocation, projects that involve a railroad, especially if you are impacting or relocating a portion of the railroad or impacting a railroad crossing, can take substantially more time than this. I have seen just the right-of-way process on a project take 2 to 3 years. So, be aware of that and understand what can affect your schedule, because of course more time means more money. So it's important that you understand that. The other thing that's important to understand is any project funded through PennDOT is going to be administered through PennDOT's Engineering and Construction Management System, or ECMS. So the local sponsor must be a business partner in ECMS before they can ever start receiving funding for a project. So it's important that if you are thinking of trying to fund a project through PennDOT, that you get registered as a business partner as early as possible. There are links on the ECMS homepage that can help you understand how to become a business partner and what it takes to register. But it's important to get that done early because it can take some time to do that. The other thing is all of these projects funded through PennDOT and SPC will have a reimbursement agreement that must be completed before any funds can be expended as part of the project, and the reimbursement agreements are completed through this reimbursement agreement system. You must first be a registered ECMS business partner to then get access to the reimbursement agreement system. And these agreements can take several months to process. And again, no funding can be expended or reimbursed until this agreement is in place. So it's just important to understand that this can also take some time. PennDOT Publication 93 covers all of the requirements for administration of consultant agreements, and that includes consultant construction inspection. If you are proposing a local project funded through PennDOT or SPC, you, the local sponsor, will most likely be responsible for construction inspection of the project. And so you need to understand that, and you will most likely have some type of an agreement with someone to do your construction inspection. Selection of any consultants or construction inspector that is paid for with federal or state dollars must be in accordance with Pub 93. And just some of the requirements for that are a lot of it depends on the size of the contract that you're selecting for. Now, this is not your construction dollars. So you could have a $5 million construction project, but the contract that you're selecting for, if you're selecting for a design contract or an inspection contract, is what we're talking about with this $150,000 limit. Anything less than $150,000 can follow the small project procedures, which are more simple and easier to complete. It's basically a one-step process. Large projects greater than $150,000, again, for the contract that you're selecting for, has to follow the large project procedures, and those can take some time to complete. The one thing to be aware of here is if you are selecting a project that there is a possibility that the contract you're selecting for is going to be around 150,000, you might want to just go with the large project procedures, even if you're estimating that it's going to be slightly below. So like you're at $145,000. I would suggest going with the large project selection procedures, just because if there's any changes to that contract, or if you need to do any amendments to add money to it, if you're at $145,000 when you select and you use small project procedures, and then you need to do an amendment that's going to take you over the 150,000, you're going to have to select again, because your procedures will no longer have been in compliance with Chapter 93. So you just want to be careful when you are putting out your bids on these projects. If you have a contract that could be close to 150,000, I would suggest going with large project procedures, just so you're not going to run the risk of having to re-advertise. There are procedures that will allow you to use your designated municipal engineer, but the only way you can use your municipal engineer for design of any of these projects is if, when they are being paid for with state or federal money, is if they were selected with an approved competitive qualification-based procedure that meets the requirements of Chapter 93, and they are qualified to complete the work you need to do. The contract you have with them states that they are under contract for that type of work. And then, PennDOT must approve the use of that municipal engineer to do the work. And again, that's when you're trying to pay that designated municipal engineer with dollars from the state or federal government. These are just some of the project milestones that all federally and state funded projects must go through. There is an environmental clearance process that is part of preliminary design. Now, that environmental clearance process is a little bit different for TA funded projects and PennDOT multimodal funded projects. There's a slightly different process, just something you need to be aware of. Utility clearance will be required, a railroad clearance, a right-of-way clearance. And each of those, the utility, the railroad, and the right-of-way clearance, are required, even if you do not impact any utilities, even if you're not impacting a railroad, and even if you do not need any right-of-way for your project, you still must go through a process to get your clearances. In the cases where there's nothing impacted, it will be a simpler process, but just be aware that you will have to obtain those clearances for all projects. And then you have to prepare what's called a plan, specification, and estimate package that complies with PennDOT's requirements. So Pub 51, PennDOT's Pub 51 covers everything that is required in a PS&E package, and it's a lot. And then Design Manual 3 covers the plan presentation requirements that PennDOT wants to see in PS&E packages for federally and state funded projects. And all of these projects are required to be advertised through ECMS for construction. There is still a paper process that can be used on very rare cases. I would say if you're looking for federal and state money, I would plan for the project to be advertised for PennDOT by PennDOT through the ECMS system. So just a quick summary, to get federal and state dollars for these local projects, you have to be a PennDOT business partner. You have to have access to the reimbursement agreement system, and that requires that PennDOT ECMS business partner first. Selection of any consultants, including construction inspectors that are going to be paid for with federal and state dollars, must follow Pub 93. There is a reimbursement agreement that will be required through the reimbursement agreement system. The resolution for a signatory authority as part of the reimbursement agreement process, you were required to pass, the municipality will be required to pass a resolution that shows who has signatory authority for that municipality or for that local sponsor. And that signatory authority resolution then becomes part of the reimbursement agreement. And it is that person or that title that has to be the one that signs the agreement in the system. It can be very helpful to have a consultant that has PennDOT experience, and Pub 740, I believe it's in Chapter 3, has a list of requirements of what PennDOT considers a PennDOT experienced consultant. So it's a consultant that has successfully let projects through ECMS, so many projects within the past so many years. But again, that's all detailed in Pub 740. But when you have a consultant that understands the PennDOT process, they can help you understand the scope, help you with cost estimating and design and budgeting for your project. And they can also help you understand what might impact your schedule better than, a consultant that does not have that experience. So I went through that fairly quickly. Hopefully I didn't take too much time, Ryan, but I don't know if you want to see if there's any questions in the chat now.
Yeah, thanks, Dawn. Just to reiterate a couple of key points here would be on the SPC programs, the two that I went in detail on, the TA program and the CMAC program, the best place to get additional information is our website, and we have the guidance documents for both of those programs. On Monday, we will enable the CMAC guidance and the CMAC application. So they'll have everything you need for CMAC, everything you need for the TA program on our website. For the kind of stuff that Dawn was talking about on some of these other programs, utilize the link that we provided to our funding guidance. That provides about it's like a 6 or 8 page summary, and it has all the links you need to launch to those organizations' websites for more information on those other programs, the non-SPC programs. And lastly, that Pub 740 that we put the link to in the chat, that's your pretty much major guidance document when it comes to the projects that we're typically dealing with on the tip, and any project that would get funding from the CMAC program or the TA program. I'd say 90% of the projects are going to follow the processes outlined in that Pub 740 that was that Dawn went over. So those are just the last concluding points I wanted to make. I scrolled through the chat, Dawn. I didn't see a lot of questions.
I'm only seeing one, Ryan, and it's related to CMAC. Chris is
that's from Chris.
Yeah.
Here's what I'll do. If Chris is still on, is he still on? I was gonna attempt to unmute him to have him explain, but I don't see him on here anymore.
Yeah, I'm not seeing him either.
He might have dropped off. He's probably talking about, this is case by case specific. He's asking about some type of traffic control, either in design or in a signal or something. So the main way to answer that is I can answer it generally, but then we'd have to look at a case-by-case basis on each application. But the CMAQ, where we see the biggest bang for a buck on those type of projects is in the actual signal coordination. There's got to be a pretty significant traffic volume, and there's got to be pretty significant queuing or congestion kind of in the existing condition. So when you come in and you get, 5, 6, 7, 8 signals coordinated on a corridor, and you can manage traffic flow through there, you're going to really alleviate a lot of queuing, a lot of congestion. And that's what does good in the air quality modeling, removing those idling vehicles that are queued up at a light, not moving, to the extent that you can get traffic volumes moving and not having the idle. That's going to give you your best technical scoring in terms of what the project's doing in terms of the air quality modeling. And that's probably been our number one project type that we've done with CMAQ, just because they score so well, and because SPC does some through our signal program. PennDOT's done a lot of that, adaptive type signals on their corridors. Same thing with the city a little bit. So those are good projects. So to the extent that I'm addressing his comment there, that's where you see the biggest bang for your buck when it comes to that type of a project. I guess what I'll do here is I'll unmute everybody here, and we could take, if it's okay, I think we've got a little more time, 10 minutes or so, if we wanted to take anybody's comment, or if anyone, you should be able to unmute if you just want to chime in with a question for myself.
Yeah, there is a question from Catherine. She asked, I had said projects that include right-of-way, does that mean getting right-of-way where there wasn't any right-of-way before? And yes, I mean, when you're a local sponsor for one of these local projects, you must own the right-of-way where the project is going to take place. So sometimes there's a project that a local sponsor is proposing, but they may not own all of the property that is needed for where that project is going to occur. And so there's a process that has to occur where the right-of-way is acquired. That is, like I mentioned, it has to follow the federal Uniform Relocation Act. I can't remember the name of that act is 500 words long, I think, but it has to follow that federal process, and it can be very time consuming to get through that process. And so I think for a lot of these funding sources, projects that already have the right-of-way acquired rate higher in terms of deliverability than a project that would have to acquire right-of-way as part of the project. They're going to rate a little bit lower in terms of deliverability because it can really affect how long it takes to get the project to construction.
Don, this is Chuck and Brogno at SPC. To add to your answer, even if you own the right-of-way, it may not be zoned appropriately. You may need a variance or rezoning or something, which will take almost as much time as buying it outright.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
I can address this next one. Is there a matrix or a table, or is there a funding cheat sheet that enables one to easily evaluate sources of funding, like a matrix table comparing funding amounts matched and types of projects eligible? I think the best source for that would be our funding guidance that we've put out. I think Lily had earlier in the chat dropped a link into that. Maybe maybe you could drop another link into that, Lily, just to our SPC funding guidance. And what that does is it sets up a, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 pages where we cover all the stuff that was included in this webinar in a consistent way. So it tells you what the match is. It'll tell you what the match requirements are. It'll tell you which of the programs are reimbursements and which ones are eligible for planning. It'll show you approximately the time frame. It'll show you approximately what project types are eligible and what sponsor types are eligible. So it is designed to kind of be a shortcut to some of the more well-known programs. And then it also includes links to those, like if it's not an SPC program, let's say if it's a PennDOT or a DCNR program, it'll include links that take you out to for more information on those. And then the last page is a little kind of yearly calendar thing that we try to keep updated so that all these programs have kind of different timing as far as when the applications are available, when selections are made. Some of them are more regular than others. Some of them just, it kind of depends on, multiple factors of whether they're going to have a round of applications that year or not. But we do have a little chart in there where we try to update that 2-3 times a year, maybe, for what we know some of these different application cycles are going to be for these different projects. That should have answered that one. Anyone else from audio have any questions for either Dawn or myself?
Hi, Ryan. This is Harold. Hey, I just
have a question. A familiar voice. How are you? Yeah. Thanks for joining us. You want an introduction?
A wonderful overview. You guys both did a great job. So we are certainly trying to dig into this a little bit further ourselves. Just a quick question. I think I know the answer, but just to clarify, we talked today on the TTC about roundabouts, and I believe that those are eligible as well for CMAQ.
Hey, Ryan, I can answer that one. This is Chuck.
Go ahead, Chuck. You're a better one to answer that. I was see if I was going to be right.
Technically, they're eligible.
Yeah.
The Pennsylvania Division of FHWA has some criteria, some guidance. There's a traffic volume, AADT threshold that the project should be above. So there needs to be some kind of congestion existing, and the roundabout should alleviate that congestion. If the existing condition is not congested, the traffic roundabout will probably not show any emission benefits. So we can get you that threshold for even considering a roundabout for AADT.
Wonderful. Thanks for the details. I think we're good for now. I just wanted to keep it on our list of types of projects to look for.
No, excellent question, Harold. And that's way of thinking out of the box there for funding some locations where we might have roundabouts in the future. So thank you for that. Let me just check the chat here. I think we're caught up, Dawn, on the chat. We'll hang out here for a minute or two, see if anyone has any more verbal. They want to unmute themselves and ask us a question, and so we'll just hang out for a little bit. But yeah, while we're seeing if anything else comes in, I just want to thank the people that took some time out of their day to watch this webinar. And hopefully, if you're considering a TA project or you're considering a CMAQ application, that we at least gave you something to chew on there. We directed you to all the resources we have and gave you some of the hurdles you're going to have to encounter with the project delivery on some of these. So Want to thank Dawn and the McCormick Taylor team for giving us a little assist here. And Dawn's one of the most knowledgeable people on that Pub 740, having co-authored it and done the training on it. So we're pretty lucky to be able to tap into her expertise. And just wanted to thank the Harold chimed in, but wanted to thank the other PennDOT staffs for being available. Sometimes we get detailed questions on these forums about ECMS or about, PennDOT requirements. And, it's always good to have some experts in the room, so to say, to answer those questions. So thanks for joining us, taking some time to do that. And I'm gonna ask one more time if we had any questions about SPC's TA program or CMAQ program, any of the other programs that we kind of tried to direct you to that, they're not SPC programs, but we try to share that info with everyone, or a delivery Pub 740 question. Okay. I think we're caught up on questions, Dawn. I think we're gonna call it a wrap here. What do you think?
Yep, that works for me.
Okay. Well, once again, thanks for joining us. We'll make the PowerPoint available on our. It's on the funding page, the transportation funding programs part of the SPC website. We will make the PowerPoint available, and we will make this recording available. And come Monday, you'll have the CMAQ applications and the CMAQ guidance. So that does it for me from SPC. Ryan Gordon saying thanks for everyone for joining us, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.